What's happening? What's happening? And what's going on, blues people? So first and foremost, if you can hear me and you're already here with me, drop a line. Just let me know that you hear me because we're going to have a nice little talk this evening. As you know, I can't wait to act. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Remember, you can, if you don't catch the live, you can always hear us, hear me. Ha ha. Thank you, little Frosty. You can always hear us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every major stream service. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's get into this. First and foremost, how y'all doing? How are y'all doing? I hope you are all safe. Those of you that are still dealing with aftermaths of these storms, or still in limbo, or still whatever is happening. And when I say whatever is happening, I don't mean that condescendingly, because I know what it is like to survive a tornado, and also we know what it's like to be around floods and stuff. So our prayers out to y'all. Don't hesitate to reach out to Jack Dapper Blues and the African American folklore. Guys, first and foremost, forgive us and forgive me for the tardiness of this episode, not episode, issue 6. Peace and love, good brother Tiger Blues. What's happening with you, man? You know, we got to really get together and play some blues, man. You know, you're not far from it. We'll work on that. Please forgive me, y'all. We are behind schedule with the African American Folklorist Magazine, issue 6. What's happening, young man? You're going to get it really soon. Okay, the God willing, it will be closed and to print by the end of the week. Okay. Some house cleaning before we get into it. Most of you who rock with me already know this, so just bear with me. Again, you can listen on Spotify, all major streaming services. Okay. Some of our new hoodies. And where you know where you can get that from? Okay. Jack Dapper Blues, African American Folklorist and the Blues. Now, this is not only the YouTube channel, but this is also the Patreon. And I got one new Patreon, 19 more, and I will begin to let you in on the behind the scenes of this album I'm recording. And I'm working with a couple of groovy cats on a different capacity, because, you know, when I do something, it has to be folkloristic, and it has to be ethnographic, and it has to be something that has to do with ethnomusicology, you know, like my discipline, but also our tradition and our culture and expression. And I think you're going to like this project, and I'll be working with a couple of cool cats. And I'll get, you know, you'll be able to get the backstage pass, if you will, by joining the Patreon. Okay, by joining the Patreon, you will get the backstage pass to the recording of the African American Folklorist and the Blues. Okay, Blues People Music and Folklore, which is a curriculum we're going to launch this summer. Hopefully, the goal is to have that the first installment of this workshop, which is a piece of the curriculum, lead into our upcoming festival. Okay. And the Jack Dapper Blues Reflexive Podcast, which is also on Patreon. So 19 more Patreon paid tier members, and you will start receiving these things. All right. So now that this is taken care of, and I'll talk about that again later, let's get to the let's get to it. What we're talking about today or tonight. Remember, every Sunday between 9 and 10 p.m., I'll be live broadcasting, and we'll be in this conversation of blues and how blues functions in Black American culture, in Afro-Indigenous culture, in Black Southern culture. And then we're going to get to blues and how the intersection between race relations, ethnicity relations or ethnic relations, regional relations, folk group relations, and all of that. So every week we're going to discuss different, um, I guess, compartments of the blues. Okay. And this is also going to lead up to this summer. I don't know if I can mention it yet, but there's a workshop slash lecture I'll be doing. A couple, but one I find they're all important, but one that's coming up that I was asked to do for several reasons in Mississippi. Also leading up to the award I'll be receiving from Just Blues. Bless them and make sure you bless them. And then my I don't know. I let's. I may start referring to myself as storyteller. I really don't, but the way my performance of blues happens, it's music and story, music and history, music and context. As I share the journey of my family, uh, generations up until this point in the blues. Okay, so we'll get to that. But so I say all that to say these episodes and future episodes kind of put in context and give you pieces of these workshops and lectures and performances and curricula that Jack Dapper Blues provides. Okay. And today we're going to be talking about writing the blues, writing the blues, Black stories in literature and film. And for those who are rocking, when I say Black stories in literature and film pertaining to the blues, right? What does that mean? What do y'all think it means? Somebody give me a what you think it means. I'm gonna try to see if I could because I don't really. And oh, for those of you that are watching on Instagram, I'm not sure how this connection with StreamYard Instagram functions. So Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and all of these other platforms, I see your statements. Instagram, I really don't see what it is y'all are saying. Okay, so if you're speaking and I'm not responding, it's definitely not because you're being ignored. Okay, so back to the question. Writing the blues, Black stories in literature and film. What are we talking about? And why is that significant? And then who can we, I guess, use as examples of this, right? And I kind of hesitate to say who can we use as examples for the simple fact that they're more than examples. They're living testaments, they're living testimonies, they're living, breathing, or maybe at one time living, breathing through their vessel, but they may have transcended and passed on, but their work is still living and breathing in the space of the blues people, right? So, always have this handy here somewhere. Speaking of the blues people, I don't want to knock nothing over because as you can see, I have a whole bunch of books over here. But I could start with Leroy Jones and Miri Baraka. Um, and I like starting with Amiri Baraka because he writes the blues on several fronts. Okay, so he writes the infamous Blues People, right? Where's this book at? I know I have it over here somewhere. He writes the infamous. Oh, here we go. I got to be careful because it's like I have a camera sitting right on it. Don't ask, don't ask. So he writes the infamous Blues People. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read the title: Blues People, Negro Music in White America. And for me, this is the Bible of the blues people experience to a degree. I say to a degree because it's very Afrocentric, African centered, but which means that there's not a lot of indigenous connections, indigenous to Americas, but there's a lot of Black American experiences which are indigenous experiences, right? So blues people, Negro music in white America, which Langston Hughes says a must for all who would like to be more knowledgeable and appreciate a better comprehension of America's most popular music is pretty much what Langston Hughes says about this book. And Leroy Jones is one of the people that informs my scholarship. But it's not just blues people, right? When it comes to Leroy Jones writing the blues. Oh, what does that mean? So Leroy Jones is a playwright. He's a poet. All of these things are considered blues writing. So when we say blues writing, and I think I want to start with my man Langston Hughes as well. What do we mean by blues writing? Anybody listening, give me, I don't know if it's going to be a lot for you to write, but what do we mean by blues writing? Well, you know, first and foremost, I want you all to understand the blues is more than just music. It is not simply and only a musical expression, right? Hey, what's happening, Don? Blues is not just a musical expression, okay? Blues is history, right? Blues is history. What else? Storytelling. It is the essence, the very essence of Black life in America, Black American life. So while we often talk about the blues in terms of sound, sonics, right? Soundscape, even landscape, and we can discuss how landscape and writing the blues are synonymous. But blues is not just sonics, right? And I got some definitions here that I wrote that I will share with you in a second, right? But before we get to that, I want to keep going with this, right? It's not just sonics, right? Blues have been written. Um, I think that was on. See, I have my phone up because unfortunately, like I said, nothing that comes in from Instagram comes in on this feed. I'm gonna figure out how to work that out. Okay, so it's not just sonics. Hold on, let me look at my peoples while we're having this discussion. I'll get back to Langston Hughes. Blues is not just sonics. So if you see me looking around, I have notes all over the place. I have notes on my laptop here, notebook, if you will. I have notes in front of me. Sometimes I like to show you guys the pictures of the people that I'm discussing or referencing, right? But again, blues is not just sonic communication. It's not just sound communication. It's not just music communication, right? It's not just all of the above frequency and or energy. And yes, it definitely has to do with landscape, and landscape can be written, but what I want to get to is blues how Black American authors have, well, how can I led the charge in this discourse. So what Black American authors are we discussing? We're talking about literary writers, literature writers, right? Book authors, poets. So of course, narratives, right? Now we're speaking more text based, but in a lot of cases, the text becomes, and we spoke about word materializing into physical form, right? So we're starting with text. Blues is text, right? Leroy Jones, W.E.B. Du Bois, Margaret Walker. Some people are going to be discussing Langston Hughes, Sterling Brown, Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, right? But we could think about one of my favorites and someone that I did a show about, which you can see if you become a Patreon member. Now this was the actual show. August Wilson, Black Folk Everything. To me, August Wilson is the epitome of Black blues text. But when I say Black blues text, he writes the blues that materializes into, first and foremost, living, breathing action on stage, right? Script, book, poem, stage play, right? Then from stage play to movie. So these are the mediums we're discussing, and how the discourse of writing the blues is what's happening, Brother Brock. How the discourse of writing the blues is how you say disseminated through different channels, right? So now with that, we're also looking at something deeper. We're looking at blues as a culture. We're looking at blues as a tradition. We're looking at blues as a way of life. Now, a lot of times when the blues is being discussed, now for those of you who follow me, know I've always discussed the blues as an ideology, a blues as a particular interaction, action, engagement. How about my homie Roscoe say code of conduct? So the blues has multiple functions, and this is why, referring back to Leroy Jones, aka Amiri Baraka, the blues people is the term I use to describe Black Americans and Black American culture, specific to or starting from or infused with Southern, Delta, Piedmont, traditions, right? So again, we're looking at it as a culture. And why are we looking at it as a culture when it comes to, and we're going to put this up again, writing the blues, Black stories in literature and film? Why are we looking at the blues as a culture, as a tradition, when it comes to stories in literature and film, texts written? Because there are moments where the term blues is not even present. So I'm going to jump around here, right? I'm going to jump around here. But I have, of course, I have my notes, but I'm going to jump around here because I think it's imperative to evoke immediately what comes up one side, right? So what do I mean by the blues? The term is not right there in your face, but the culture, the experience of the blues and the blues people, that's what the entire literature, the text is about. First and foremost, Mildred D. Taylor. Okay. Why is she important? What does she do? Well, she's very important in the Pearly household, and I'll get to that because we also have a program that for homeschool, and even not necessarily just for homeschool. We call it family folklore. That Mildred D. Taylor in her book series allows us to have family time. But before I get, well, I'll just tell you real quick. What you do is you read the book with your family, and if God willing, you have 3 generations. We started, we read it. It was my mother, blessed the transcended, uh, me, Denise, Mrs. Pearlie, LJ, and Sammy, and Kiki. I won't call out your family, your Pearlie family name, right? And what we did was we read this particular book, Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry, which is what Mildred Taylor did and why she's important to the blues and the blues people is because she took her Black Southern experiences and created a book series about it. She may have combined some of the characters, so 2 or 3 people may become one. She may have kind of, we've changed names for the privacy, that sort of thing. But what she did with these books was gave you, what's good, Hoffa? What she did with these books is she gave you a piece of blues people experience. So now it didn't say blues. It spoke about music, interaction, exchange, family, culture, tradition, midwife, medicine people, reading, school, walking on a dirt road, cultural and race relations between poor and class relations, everything that the blues and the blues people deal with. So Mildred D. Taylor would easily be writing the blues because she's writing about the blues people. Now, the program that we have, reach out to me and I'll give you more detail, but just to touch on it and how it came about. As a caretaker of my mother always believing we had culture and always pushing that narrative and making sure we engage the culture of our people. And Mrs. Pearlie always saying we're building our own traditions, and then you all know what I do and things of this nature. We would sit in the living room and we would read this book. And then for LJ and Sammy, because they were quite young at the time, to give them a visual and an experiential understanding of what we were reading, they would ask their grandmother questions. Why would they ask their grandmother questions? Because my mother would identify some of the moments in the book. Then we would stop reading and she would share a story. Then, so what would end up happening is we're having a 3-generation conversation that does 2 functions: helps reading comprehensions, and it helps understand, I guess you could say, family or familial, folk group, traditional experience and engagement. So then what ends up happening is from that, as we keep reading and then the kids learn vocabulary, they start creating questions that they want to ask their grandmother. And then they ask questions they want to ask me and their mother. And then we have these conversations about the generations and how far removed we're from this, how close, what we experienced. Then we followed up with LJ and Sammy created games to mirror the games that was read in the book. Why? Because again, their grandmother, my mother, who lived during the time Mildred D. Taylor is talking about, was reminded of games. So then LJ and Sammy would ask her, and then they would come up with their versions of those games that they could play with the tools they had at the time. Because remember, kids at the time we were reading this had internet and digital, where kids at the time Mildred D. Taylor was discussing in the book, that's not what they had. Right. So with all that, what I'm saying is, one, that's family folklore, and that's how we utilize the book. And if you want more information on that, reach out. Two, Mildred D. Taylor is a writer of blues, not a singer of blues, because and why she's even that much more significant, because you would not see hold on, let me look at my people while I'm discussing this one. In her book, you will not necessarily see blues this or blues that, or keeping the blues alive or anything. What you're seeing is cultural engagement, exchanges, human interaction, exchanges, agreed upon um, codes and formal and informal rules, things that happen within family, within community. And when I say community, I'm not saying it in a what's the ambiguous way. I mean community as in communal, folk group, living area, right? So when we're thinking about writing the blues, Black stories in literature and film, and we're thinking about, well, how does blues play into literature? Mildred D. Taylor is one of the first and best, for me, people we could discuss, because she's not necessarily just going right in and saying, I'm writing about the blues. She's writing about the blues people experience in the root of the blues people's landscape. And then she describes landscape, soundscape. I guess for layman's people, and when I say layman's people, landscape and soundscape does have multiple meanings. So she describes the terrain. She describes in detail the what she hears, what she sees, what she feels, the space, the locations that these things are happening. The land and the importance of land ownership by her peoples. This is the story of the blues. Do you understand? And we're just beginning, right? We're just beginning. I want you to see Mildred. Look this woman up. Now I want to give you a Let's see. Okay. Now with that being said, okay, let's. Oh wait, hold on. Y'all know who this is? Now there's one woman that should be with these two scholars, Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright, right? So the blues as literature has always been a form of storytelling. The blues, period, has always been a form of storytelling. It carries the voices of those who came before, it carries the voices of those in the present, it carries the voices of those in the present towards the future, and then it carries the voices of those in the future of the same cycle. Understand? Writers like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, Sterling A. Brown, Margaret Walker, W.E.B. Du Bois, Mildred D. Taylor, who I just shared with you all, and Alice Walker, someone that we're going to discuss as well, because she is another prime example of writer of the blues, as is Richard Wright, right? And again, people like Zora Neale Hurston, Sterling Brown, Leroy Jones, Langston Hughes. I would even say my favorite, who we're going to discuss a little bit, and you can also go become a Patreon to see my episode on August Wilson, and then you could also see my episode on Ma Rainey Black Bottom on the same YouTube channel. August Wilson utilizes the term blues, but he also writes it from a space where he doesn't have to say the term blues. You know, he's talking about the blues people and the blues people experience. So when you think of Richard Wright, when you think of Margaret Walker, Alice Walker, and folks like this, the text in their writing before it manifests into physical or materialize into a physical space. Their text is based and is describing the story of the blues people, and in some cases they may not even use the term blues, right? So we'll get to that. But anyway, the weary blues, their eyes are watching God, right? Now, the weary blues goes back to what I was just explaining, direct correlations and statements utilizing the term blues. Now, the weary blues is written by Langston Hughes, right? And it's recorded, so you can actually hear his voice and him speaking with some blues in the back. But he's utilizing directly the embodiment of blues as he discusses its rhythms, its pains, its resilience. And also remember, a lot of his writing, if not all of it, is the blues and is based around the blues. Some of it, he's just not mentioning it, but in Weary Blues, he is mentioning the blues, okay? Then we go back to Dr. Hurston. Their eyes were watching God, which brought the cadence and improvisation of the blues into her storytelling, to say the least. But more importantly, Zora was in the mix. So when I say more importantly, you can't get cadence, true context of cadence, if you're not in the space. And she was of it and in the space. She could sing it. She interacted with it. She went to the card spots. So, you know, to the workplaces. She played games with children. She sat down on the porch and interviewed this woman and got her story of the blues, right? Margaret Walker. Now, the reason why I brought up Margaret Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, and Richard Wright, because the three of them were part of the WPA Writers Project, right? Are y'all familiar with the WPA Writers Project? That was a Library of Congress program for writers that were affected by a financial crisis. So a big portion of it was the was it over 2,000, 3,000 interviews with former slaves, or those born into slavery, born during the emancipation, where these writers and journalists and poets and things went out and interviewed these former slaves, but they also had other programs, right? And Margaret Walker wrote For My People and Jubilee. And these things, these writings, if you will, exhibited the blues. It gave the discourse of the blues, right? Now here's a small excerpt of it where she goes, the moan would become a spiritual, the spiritual would become jazz, which would become blues, rhythm and blues, then rap. So she kind of, well, there's no kind of. She encapsulates Black expression through its generations, understanding its connection through text because she was a writer of blues. And I would suggest you, and she was also, she also, how can I say this? Engaged in folkloristics and ethnographic interviews, right? Telling of the stories. Everything's not just about survival, but survival is definitely part of the Black story, right? Another one. Now, I speak about this cat a lot, you know, and I find it ironic that I speak about Du Bois so much, considering, and you know, I didn't. Considering I had so much problems with Du Bois at one time, I find it because I was grappling with his stance, right? I was grappling with the fact that he was grandfathered into a position, and he was grandfathered into this position by white elitists. And when I say white elitists, I mean slave owners. Those who, you know, exploited resources and people. So he was grandfathered into position through the very people that exploited the people that Du Bois professed to speak for. So I really grappled with his intentions for a long time. But you can also understand where great ideologies and methodologies like Souls of Black Folk, the Philadelphia Story, which I have over here, and other sociological projects that he did, which again, I don't think he gets enough credit as being of the first scholars, American scholars, to employ folkloristic methodologies, uh, ethnomusicological methodologies, because he didn't just, excuse me, speak to look at break down patterns of Blackness, but it was also patterns of Black expression. He also, and even musicology, right? When he speaks of sorrow songs, he speaks of it, one, if you understand what ethnomusicology is more based on the experience and culture of sound and what we believe is to be music. And that's a very, very, very basic understanding. And musicology, which is the history and aesthetic and text of lyric and composition. So we have someone who worked in this space. Then we have someone who did surveys, who did participatory ethnography, meaning he engaged in community. And when I'm not using community ambiguously, I'm using community as in he went to locations and he messed with the people. And when I say messing with, he sat with them, he spoke with them, he interviewed them, he watched them. So he did surveys, he looked at patterns of behavior, but he also did that with music and lyrics and compositions because he introduces the term sorrow songs to us. So again, I say all this to say, and he wrote the blues. Souls of Black Folk is the blues, hands down. The conservation of races and the Negro not only reflects um, history, cultural identity, right? It is the text of the blues. So so I go into, I guess I go into these deep thoughts when I bring up Du Bois because of all the things that I grapple with. Then, not to mention, you know, his issue with Booker T. Washington, who was someone else I used to grapple with. And Booker T. Washington employs blues text, but he was also in a different set. See, Du Bois, as one who perpetuated or encouraged liberal arts, was definitely of the ideology and methodology, or to be as simple as possible, the use of text, words, documents, blues as literature from his multiple essays, and being an editor of the newspaper and all the things that he's done. Whereas Booker T. Washington um, operated more as a blues song, soundscape, landscape. As he operated more August Wilson, where August Wilson's text, text, materializes into physical properties, right? And so these two guys were bumping heads. But going back to another connection, right? How Zora Neale Hurston, a writer and practitioner of blues, finds herself in the whirlwind and eye of the storm of actual socioeconomic blues, where she has nothing. She reaches out to Langston Hughes, who always seemed to dance around the elite, even though he had his issues too. Don't get me wrong. And she reaches out to him. You can, and she's like, "We need a benevolence fund for those that do the work we do." You know, I remember hearing David Banner speak about this very recently, where he's like, you know, black folk don't take care of their leaders and their elders and their uh, warriors of consciousness, right? And this is all connected. So I think of, again, going back to what I was saying, Zora Neale Hurston reaches out to W.E.B. Du Bois and is like, we need a benevolence fund for our warriors of consciousness. And he's just really writes her off. Now, maybe this is during the time he was exiled. I don't know, but I know he didn't mess with her. I know black folk turned their back on Alice Walker because her writings was of the blues. She wrote about very, very, very vivid and descriptive abuse of black bodies by black bodies. That's the blues. She was attacked. I don't know if she was physically attacked. Well, yeah, she had to be physically attacked based on the work that she was doing in the South as a civil rights worker. But she was attacked by black gatekeepers and elites and those who did not want to see stories like The Color Purple and a lot of the stories that she did that was the blues. And if you know the blues and if you're true and earnest and honest about the blues people experience, then you know what she was writing was coming from a truthful place. As my homie used to say, the blues is the butt naked truth, right? Um, so black folk of the upper echelon um, kind of was attacking Alice Walker, how Zora Neale Hurston reached out to black folk of the upper echelon and it fell on deaf ears. But here it was Alice Walker who made sure Zora Neale Hurston's um, grave had a headstone and it was recognized. And these are very powerful women of blues writing. You know, the color purple is not the only writing of blues people. Now, I have to say, when we speak of resilience and survival, there's a lot of black trauma. There's a lot of trauma in the black community that is generational trauma that has been written about for multiple and many generations that has never been addressed. I got to show you our dear sister, an elder and warrior of consciousness through blues writings, uh, Alice Walker, right? And matter of fact, let me remove this so you can see, so I can give the honor and respect so you can see her name and her face. She, as a uh, warrior of consciousness, wrote about black trauma, the trauma of black on black crime, black on black bodily abuse. And you know, nobody really wanted it's kind of like this thing where we don't want the blues, we don't want anything that reminds us of those days, but those days informs who we become many generations later. And if we don't address and deal with that trauma, and so the blues does deal with trauma, you know, and the color purple, the original color purple in the book, the color purple deals with that trauma that Alice Walker talks about. Because the blues is not just a party, okay? It's not just frolicking. It's not just about my woman left me. It could be about that man is beating on that woman. That uncle is touching on that kid. That aunt is touching on that nephew. That boy who has no parents is being abused in that house. That girl who daddy ain't our daddy. I can go down the line. That is the blues of our people. Something that people call dirty laundry. Alice Walker spoke about internal culture of the blues people. Some not as serious and detrimental and sensitive as what I mentioned, right? There was one she discussed about generational values when it came to a quilt and how a family member viewed it and what they wanted to do with that quilt and how another family member or older family member viewed it and what they wanted to do and how, you know, and that goes back to Now, I love Alice Walker. So when I say my guy, I don't want y'all to take it the wrong way, but that goes back to my guy. This here is about blues people and generational value systems. I always bring up how John Wesley Work writes, because he writes the blues too. The people of the blues were in a constant depressive state. So when you look at the piano lesson, notice I say, look, because it starts as text. We're talking about writing the blues, literature, narrative, and film. But before it got to film, it was on stage. So there are multiple ways it materialized through text because words live. The piano lesson, generational value. Now we could talk about belief systems, right? And when I say belief systems, excuse me, I think I just hit the microphone. I don't know why that is happening. Maybe because it's how I have the light coming down. I'm not going to fix it now because we in it. But when we talk about belief systems, right now I'm not talking about sacred, spiritual, or what some of my homies say, spooky dooky and all of this. I'm talking about belief systems, value system, sentimental system, and what sentimental really means as it pertains to a material item of Black tradition. Now, not only Black Americans have this, everyone, every culture, every ethnicity, every nationality, every folk group, every tribe has this. I'm speaking specific to the blues people though. But if you're not what could be considered blues people, you can still apply what I'm saying to your people. Okay? The piano lesson, text to material, value system, generational value system, experience value system, abuse, abused person, trauma induced person value system, someone that was so written by trauma, the value of something priceless, they put a price on it for material gain because they were disconnected from the root. So this is how region, landscape, land, soundscape, sound, sonic, blues, and blues land space functions with text, material. But that's not the only story of the blues that August Wilson touched on that was based on trauma induced value systems, right? I know I keep saying, you see what's going on, right? It's all right. I rocks with the ancestors. Fences got to be one of the most, it's got to be one of the most, Jesus Christ. Sorry, y'all. Because it's got to be one of the most trauma induced blue 2-hour blues songs ever made. You know, man, I can't remember the lady that is attributed to creating the very first blues song. She's out of she comes out of how do you call it? Trame. She comes out of Storyville. She is considered the woman who writes and makes the very first blues song. And what is significant about that, as I speak about fences, is because it comes out of this particular uh, lifestyle. That Fences, the father in Fences, that James Earl Jones plays, that Denzel Washington played. Both of them tapped into this character. Man, I my spirit is troubled thinking about the story. Of course, there's blues musicians in all of August Wilson's stories, and some are specific to the blues, like Ma Rainey's Black Bottles. But Fences, like the piano lesson, Fences is trauma bonding. This is the blues at its finest. So when we think about, I can't think of her name right now, um, who records what's considered, and you know, um, why is his name slipping from me right now? A lot of these New Orleans blues pianists come out of her chamber. She was a lady of the night. She worked the brothel, and this song discuss speaks to the Johns and the atmosphere she and women like her and it has to deal with. And then we think about Fences and the stories of what made this character who he was. You can see, and you know, also going full circle, August Wilson is talking back to Alice Walker in his writings with his characters. Alice Walker sets it up and she introduces us to these blues people of depression and delusion and trauma bonding. And August Wilson takes the baton from her and is informed by her, I believe. And he then, from the male energy perspective, as she approaches it from the female energy perspective, um, and that this is my take. He then shows us another version, another side of these trauma induced blues people that, again, John Wesley Work refers to as the people of the blues who are in a constant state of depression and delusion. The people who upscale blacks get upset with sometimes, the people who are accused of looting because they didn't have anything to march for, because they didn't have a job that they needed to ride the bus to. Then there's some of them that did have jobs. And I'm talking about the people in these stories. right? So this is the blues on a different level, but this is nonetheless the blues being written. And now we can go from, and I have questions. I may put the questions up if you want to engage. But we can keep going. I may put the questions up, and you guys can get it to your answers to me how you get it to me. But this is a good time to go from text and book and poem and writing to the actual manifestation of blues narrative and film and on stage, right? So now we just spoke about August Wilson, who's a great example, one of the best examples. I don't know if I spoke about Sterling Brown the way I wanted to, who was a poet who spoke to the blues. He saw the blues as more than just a musical genre. It was a way for Black people to express their experiences, emotions, and resilience in the face of adversity. He incorporated Black vernacular speech and blues forms into his poetry, reflecting the lives lived and the experiences of Black people and their unique cultural expressions. You know, we don't speak about nowadays, and this is where the blues is so unique, as Margaret Walker gives us this evolution from moans and spirituals to blues and jazz and rhythm and blues to rap to nowadays. Mental health is a conversation that people entertain. Nowadays, dealing with trauma, anguish, and abuse through the guise of mental health is something that is encouraged. So now, when we're talking about writing the blues was dealing with anguish and mental health, or the lack thereof mental health in these spaces, hence the trauma, the abuse, or the abuse of substances, or the abuse of the body, right? That's the blues that was written. So now we're going into films, and we spoke about August Wilson a lot. And I can keep going because he's one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And you can check out my take on Ma Rainey's Black Bottoms on the YouTube channel, Jacked Apple Blues, this one. But I also want to talk about other films, right? Like this one. The Watsons Go to Birmingham. Now, there's two versions. There's a 1963 version, and then there's this version, which I believe is 2013, with actors that we all know, and my family and I like. And again, majority of my blues engagement is always familial. It is always communal. It's always tribe, because we discuss these things. How does it mirror our experience? What do we learn from it? So whether it is a book that describes blues experiences, or a film that describes blues experiences, right? We make sure we always put it in the proper context. And the reason why I'm sharing that with y'all is because that's a project, I guess you could say, that you can engage with your family and your neighbors, right? So the Watsons Go to Birmingham. It is drenched in blues. It is the idea of the Great Migration, civil rights, and then going back to Birmingham, where the family originates, to get an understanding of roots, because one of the family members seemed to have been disconnected from their roots, is actually biblical. And not just that story, but the idea of being disconnected from your roots, having to go back and reconnect with the origins of your bloodline, which for me, it is the deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, and there's Virginia, right? Indian Territory, of all three. Because in the urban space, the concrete space, where in my case, Mrs. Pearlie's case, and a lot of folk that I know and came up with, we're in Northeast. I don't know. Would that be called the Northwest? Yes, right. Yeah, and in the Midwest, when our peoples who migrated, and then we grew up in these spaces away from our roots, we become disconnected, and then we start to engage in what can be considered, as the Bible says, the world, right? So when I say the world, I'm likening it to biblical scripture, where in the Bible says you get removed from spirituality, you become part of the world, and then you get disconnected from the Most High, right? So we leave from our Genesis, we leave from our what is it called, paradise or what have you, and we're taken somewhere else, and then we're disconnected, we're cut off, and then we're taking on the behavior of the world. That area, we're disconnected from our spirituality. This goes back to landscape, soundscape. So in this film, the young man is taken on, or has assimilated into, a lifestyle of Chicagoans that does not reflect the roots of his people. So they take him back down south so he can learn himself. That's what they used to say. We're going to take you. So you need to learn yourself, boy. You understand what I'm saying? Now that's the blues. And so now from script, book script, to materializing into a film, that's what this film is about. Whirlpool, whirlpool, whirlpool. My grandmama, my mama, my kids thought that was so funny. That little cute girl right there with the cheeks. Whirlpool, whirlpool. You gotta see the film, but it's the blues. Another film, Down in the Delta. Now Maya Angelou directed this particular film. Okay. Another, what I love about this one is the migration of both the daughter and cousin, and how their lives not only went in separate places, but was affected from being disconnected. This is the blues, because remember, we're talking about the blues people. Now, I'm giving you summaries of these films, and I'm giving you cultural references, and more, I guess, for some people, popular references. When I say popular references, most people know about the migration. Most people know about civil rights, right? But what they don't, I don't want to say what they don't know, so I take that back. But how I would frame it is a better way I'll say it. Is these migrations were a fluke for the most part, because then you have these black folk that move to these spaces, and what they thought was going to happen did not happen. So now they're in a land that is not theirs, in an unfamiliar territory. They make it home, but then they become what's considered products of these environments. So now you're living on top of each other in buildings and square. This is how I grew up, in buildings, right? And the way, you know, In this particular story, down in adulthood, her son trying to make it keeps getting the local drug dealer wants him to work for him. This is what's happening, I believe, there in Chicago. She's not mother of the year. This goes back to what I was just discussing. Trauma, the lack of mental health resources for Blacks in this space. So she medicates her mental and physical trauma with substance abuse. It also goes back to a value system because her mother, to my left and possibly your right, is holding on to something that the gentleman behind her who played uh man, he played quite a few things. Want what she has because it was his brother. It was a family folk relic. This goes back to value systems again because the mother kept it from her daughter, knowing that her daughter would have pawned it, not understanding the value of it because her value system has been jaded, right? This is blues. And again, it is a family material item of extreme significance that reminds the family who they are, who they come from, what they come from, where they are going. This is the blues. This is the blues narrative, is what I call it. And if you want the blues narrative, you come to the right place because this is what I speak about. And I perform the blues narrative. So you want to check out the Watsons go to Birmingham. You want to check out Down in Adulthood. You want to also check out Daughters of the Dust, which is a blues film and book, and it's drenched in belief, folk belief, hoodoo, Pentecost, practice, prayer, ritual, how people in the South got down. Now, it is very connected to Gullah and African-centric ideology. But it is of the blues. It is of the blues. Another film that I would like to discuss, and I think is extremely important to the blues, believe it or not, is The Great Debaters. Alvin Youngblood Hart, what's happening with you, bro? Sharon Jones, rest well, good sister. The ancestors stay with us. The Great Debaters reminds me of, I would imagine John Wesley Work would have made something like this because it gives you one of the most fullest looks at the blues people of that time, ideology of that time, socioeconomic, justice, injustice, education, and the importance of it. And one of the characters, I love this character. And again, we're talking about blues narrative in film from blues writers. This film was a blues written film. One of the characters, one of the who becomes one of the most not only powerful, most significant and most powerful debaters, but one of the characters, if not one of the characters that had one of the biggest changes because he danced the fine line between what could be called considered today as streets and academia, elite and lower class, the blues and the people of the gospel. And this is why I always tell people, just because someone may articulate something different than you, or just because someone is not on the academy or in the academy arena, do not think you're smarter than them. I know dudes and sisters who's never stepped on a campus for the exception of debating a professor or so-called scholar and wiping the floor with them because their scholarship is that deep. So this young man, between prison and just traveling around trying to figure it out, as we say, becomes one of the most significant debaters and understood how to research, understood reading comprehensions, but would find himself in the juke joints. And what I really loved about it was it did not present the juke joint in a nostalgic way. He hugged up on some chick and she's humping up on him. Her husband comes looking for her with a blade. I'm not celebrating the behavior. What I'm saying is it gave a real life depiction of what was happening in these landscapes slash soundscapes, because the sound, the sonics, was the blues. In some cases acoustic, some cases a cappella acoustic, right? So we have text and we have the material, right? Another one, and I would definitely, any and everybody I tell, go watch Great Debaters. That's a film that we watch once a year here. And I'll be honest with you, if I had my way, we'll probably watch it 2 or 3 times a year. But, you know, we have Lady Sings the Blues. Do I really have to talk to you about that? Diana Ross, who comes out, people forget. Facts, what's happening, good brother? We have to catch up. Lady Sings the Blues. So Diana Ross, David Ruffins, Motown, Memphis, Philadelphia. A lot of people just think about doo-wop and rhythm and blues and church. These folk was listening to blues. They was on the blues circuit. Little Richard was on the blues circuit. A lot of these dudes was performing with blues musicians that folk nostalgize about. So Donna Ross playing Lady Sings the Blues, you don't think this is what was in the house? Or if her mama was a stern Christian, her auntie was listening. Her auntie was listening. Lady Sings the Blues was the blues. Her life was the blues. Y'all know who that movie was about. You know what else was a blues film? Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars. What y'all know about that? These are blues narratives in film. Now, we spoke about blues literature. Then we spoke about blues literature that evolved to stage play, then evolved to film or book, play, film. Now we're speaking blues film, narrative as film. Of course, we have the great Queen Latifah who played Bessie, you know. And then homie that played Wallace on The Wire has something coming out. And then the good Barrel House Bonnie and her people's got a blues film that's out right now starring Leon. Right? So we still have what I like to say blues narrative as film. I'm opening back up my notebook. Make sure I'm not forgetting nothing, but want to act up on me. If you have anything you want to add, please add. I like this to be a conversation. I don't like to speak at y'all. I'm thinking of, you know what else? The It's not called the hypocrisy of it's wait, hold on, I gotta find it's a documentary. S. Apatha, I think if she didn't produce it, she did the narrations. Whoopi Goldberg was part of it, but it was about the Benevolence Society in Alabama. Fair Hope. Hold on. I want to get you guys this film. I'm looking it up now. All right. Okay. So it is called The Contradictions. The Contradictions of Fair Hope. This is a blues film, hands down. Now, here's the thing. It is not okay, wait. I think I got some folk talking to me on it's Barrel House Bonnie. What's happening, good sister? She said the name of the film is The Rhythm and the Blues, starring Leon as Eddie Taylor. Exhibition show was scheduled today at the Hades Theater in Raleigh. Man, I wish I knew that. Okay, I would have got that. Thank you. All right. Now, again, for those that's listening on Instagram, StreamYard is not seeing your is not seeing your comments. So if I just look funny because I just grabbed my phone so I could read Bonnie's statement. So the Contradictions of Fair Hope is an actual documentary, right? It is the blues. Why is it the blues? I'm going to read you, and I also have an article about it on Jack Dapper Blues. Excuse me. Now, it's an award-winning film. It's narrated. Okay, it's narrated by Whoopi Goldberg, but it was the executive producer and director is S. Apatha Murkison. Why is that important? Because that is the captain on Law and Order. Right now, she's on another TV show on NBC. One of the Chicago jump offs, but we know and love her from Law and Order, okay? And she directed and produced this. And it's about, so what happens is after emancipation, about 1 million Black Americans find themselves in this area of, I believe it's Alabama. And they find themselves, 1 million Black folk find themselves in kind of in limbo in this place in Alabama. And what they end up doing is they build a structure, they build a functioning society. Okay. And this documentary examines this little known aspect of African American or Black American history. Okay. Where these Black folk form benevolent societies to respond to hunger, illness, and the fear of the pauper's grave. Okay, so now I believe the main society, benevolent society, is called the Fair Hope Benevolent Society. So it tracks the history, the origin, the history, and then the eventual struggles and gradual loss of what? Tradition. Okay? This is the blues. And it's blues that y'all need to know. Okay? Um, Damn, what is it? A Soldier Story is a blues narrative film. Again, black on black trauma, assimilating, right? Versus what one would believe to be a free Negro, right? So these are all what you can consider. And there's more, right? There's more. I'm not claiming to give you all of them, just a couple of them, right? I want to share this with you all, and this is from Ralph Ellison, because he's a writer of the blues, right? His Invisible Man depicts the blues. The blues is an impulse to keep the painful details and episodes of a brutal existence alive in one's aching consciousness. Come on, don't you dare play with me about these blues. Black Boy is the blues. Put number one in the comments if y'all read Black Boy by Richard Wright. Me and all my friends read that growing up. Oddly enough, my mama was like, "You need to read this, boy. My son is just about finished." And now there's women blues too. I know I mentioned a lot of men. Um, I'm gonna do. There's a very important book that I cannot remember, and I read it for a black literature course, and after reading it, I brought the book home and told Mrs. Purley, "You have to read this with Sammy." I cannot remember this book. I have it here somewhere. When I locate it on this desk, I'll share it with you all. Um, but what I would say is, the more I read it, I went from having to read it with Sammy to this is a book that we have to read with Sammy and LJ. Men, women, young boys, and young girls, and everyone in between need to read the experiences of this black woman. I cannot think of the name of the book, but I will put it in the feed and I will share it all over once it's on my desk. I usually can call it to mind, but I can't right now. But I didn't. I speak about this often, but I'll just share it again. But again, like blues people, blues legacy, and black feminism, Dr. Davis is speaking direct to the blues culture, to the blues experience in black women, right? Um, yeah, and there's quite a few other books. Okay, we'll make that happen, Barrel House Bonnie. All right, so just at the core. Oh, right. Before anything else, I want to share that I don't profess to know how to say this brother's first name, right? But I do want to let you know that he's a current writer of the blues. Okay? And I want to end sharing with you all some current blues writings. Okay. And so I'm thinking I really don't want to mispronounce this brother's name. All right. So one of his books is called Heavy, an American memoir. It won the Hurston, it won the Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright Legacy Award for nonfiction, among other awards. Okay, he has a novel, Long Division. Uh, and he has quite a few things, right? But I wanted to share that one particular. He was raised and born in Mississippi. Okay, he attended Jackson State University. He got also got a Master in Fine Arts from Indiana University. Shout out to him because you know I'm a Hoosier. But I know for those that know me and grew up, we know that's crazy that I said that. But check this brother out. He is a writer of blues. Okay. Whereas other our sister, I believe I know how to say this, Jasmine Ward, another writer of blues. And these are modern day writers of blues. And of course there's more, right? There's more. Now Jasmine Ward is not only an American novelist, but she also is a professor. Um she's from she was born in Berkeley, California. Okay. And she returned to Mississippi, okay, as a youngin, and made some stuff happen. Got back in touch with her roots, okay. So some of her titles that also won awards: "Where the Line Bleeds," "Salvage the Bones," "Men We Reaped," "Sing Unburied Sing," okay, "Let Us Descend." She's won NAACP Image Award, Southern Book Prize, uh, Reading Women Award, Chicago Tribune Heartland Prize. Okay, another winner of the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for fiction in this sense. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I introduced y'all to some current writers of blues. I don't just like to dwell in past works, past people, our blues, like our culture, tradition, our words uh, evolves. Our work is for the next generation, right? When theirs is for the following. So I don't want to just always look to the past. We want to celebrate the now, and that's what's different between this idea of keeping the blues alive and living the blues. And living the blues not necessarily just the trauma, the abuse, the frolicking, the partying, the dancing, the entertainment. But we're also talking, if you remember, we spoke about this before, cultural and traditional engagement, right? Whether it's healing engagement, where we deal with spices, herbs, plants, oils, food for our body, whether we're dealing with informal and formal life lessons taught, value systems taught, discussed. You know, in the academy and in the field and in the discipline, we utilize the term informal a lot in some spaces. But if I sit down with any one of my sons or daughters, or my older brothers, cousins, bless Kasim's spirit, uncles or what have you, and we're having a conversation of code of conduct, just to make it simple, that is a formal act of lesson, learning engagement. If I'm sitting in front of LJ and showing him anything, that's formal act of a learning moment. If Denise is showing Sammy, well, I'm not going to call that name, sorry, or Kiki, or you know, any one of our relatives, you know, my nieces, and she's showing them how to measure and what spices to add and what organs they help in the kitchen, which is really, the kitchen is the classroom, it is the medical room and office, right? It is the psychiatrist's chair, right? This is formal learning and interaction. And I say that because a lot of times in the discipline and in the lessons is discussed as if it's informal because it's not in what Western uh, 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 lenses or concepts of what is formal and informal. Where in my folk group, my tribe, my family, we've we've throughout multiple generations had very formal life lessons, to say the least, or traditional lessons in spaces that are significant and formal to us, right? So I just want to get that out there. I just want to make that very clear. So with that being said, all of that gets written in these books and in these films, and that's the blues. To make a long story short, let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything, you know, as we close out on tonight's discussion. You know, I want y'all to think about this, right? Think about the tradition of writing the blues. I don't want you to think, I don't ever want you to think about keeping the blues alive, because as long as there's a blues person alive, excuse me, the blues is always going to be alive, right? We don't need anyone keeping the blues alive. As long as there's a blues person alive, blues is living. Excuse me. Now, keeping the legacy, the memory, the story, the significance of blues people, or blues functions or functionalities of past alive is different. So we keep the memory of our grandmothers alive, our grandfathers. That's keeping the blues alive. Keep the memories of Muddy Walter alive. That's keeping the blues alive. See what I'm saying? Keep the memories of how we gardened and ate and exchanged food with our neighbors before urban renewal. It's keeping the blues alive. We don't need to, but we don't need to say that. We blues people don't need to say that. Um, I want y'all to keep this story going. Matter of fact, wherever this ends up, if you're not, and when I say wherever this ends up, it's obviously on YouTube, obviously Facebook, obviously the website, and then all the streaming services. Wherever you come across it, I want you to drop a line of what book, poem, journal, article, film, play, poetry, emotion on a train. You see blues in text, not sound, in text, or play like a raisin in the sun that happened here in Bowling Green. I'm sad we could not attend. I know some people that was in it, and they're great people. And not only are they great people, that was a great story of blues. Maybe one day I'll tell you my family version of Raising the Sun, maybe not. But I want y'all to share with me and with the Jack Dapper Blues community, the Blues People community. That's what we're going to call it. We the Blues People. The Blues People community. Share with the Blues People community what blues you found. Because remember, blues is also oral history. We spoke about that last week, right? Oral history happens. I'm going to stop here because we can keep going. But I want you to share with the Blues People community what text, literature, narrative, story, film, play, poem exhibits blues. Can you dig it? Dig it, dig it. Show enough. And that was like, that was deep blues right there too, Brother D, or as we say, AK Yellow P. Y'all need to check out Memphissippi, right? Memphissippi. Check these brothers out. They gets it in. All right, good folk. I'm happy y'all rock with me. Remember, every Sunday night, but somewhere between 9 and 9:45, hell yeah. You know that's right. Somewhere, and you know, a lot of folk belief, because you know, blues speaks to our belief system, mojo, hoodoo, Pentecost, church. The sonics of blues come out of our belief system, right, bro? Um, so every Sunday night we broadcast. This is the Blues People community. I may even call it Blues People Public Radio. This is what we might be calling this. But anyway, you know it as Jack Dabba Blues, where you come to learn the blues. And God dang it, I can't wait to play some blues. Right, I'm talking about it a lot, but I want to play it. Bonnie, you got to start joining us on YouTube until I can figure out how I can get your chiming in into the feed with the people here, okay? Because Bonnie and her peoples, they hold the blues down for years. All right. Every Sunday night, we right here and we're discussing some aspect of the blues and how it functions within our community, within our system, within our engagement, whether it's performative, whether it's text like this evening, literature and story and narrative, whether it's in our food. We might talk about blues and food next week. I'm not sure. If there's something that has to do with blues and that y'all want to discuss with me next Sunday or any of these Sundays, shoot me a line and we make it happen. All right? Until the next time, y'all gonna learn those blues, keep playing them blues, tell your story. It don't matter who you are, where you're from. All right? Have a good week. All right? And give people grace if you don't do nothing else.